Okay, well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining our first innovation workshop on Helix 2022. So this morning's session is going to be moderated by JLL, and it is on the topic of addressing the real estate needs of life science occupiers. Just a couple of housekeeping points before I hand you over to Jenny and Bridget. If you can keep your microphones on mute throughout the presentation, that would be great. If you have got any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat box. And this session is being recorded. So I think that is it from me. I hope you enjoy the session and I will hand you over. Thank you.
Thanks, Jazz. Good morning, everybody. Hope you're all well. As Jazz mentioned, we are talking about addressing the real estate needs of life science occupiers. So basically helping occupiers understand what's happening in the UK life science market, what trends we're seeing, and how that's influencing the occupiers' needs. So I'll just introduce myself and then I'll hand over to Jenny. So my name is Bridget Partridge. I'm an associate in the Office and Life Science Agency team at JLL. I'm based down in London, but I cover Cambridge, Oxford and West London predominantly, but cover the whole of the South East. So I work on tenant representation as well as landlord disposal.
And I'm Jenny Gardner, so I am the Project and Development Services lead. So at JLL, we define project and development services as pretty much everything delivery related. So it could be from project management, cost management, program management, development management, all of the above. So I oversee that function. I too am based out of London, but I cover all the UK. Most of my time is spent between London, Cambridge, Oxford, and Bristol. And unfortunately, Rupert wasn't able to join us today, but Rupert is head of project management that works underneath my department, solely focused on life science product. So just a little bit about our collective team and the team that sits behind Bridget and myself. So we have 8 people that are completely dedicated to the life science and knowledge economy that sit within our London office. Outside of that, we probably have 20 plus professionals that spend more than 50% of their time focusing on this industry. A lot of us have a number of years of experience. I personally have 10, 12, 15, depending on how you want to define the knowledge economy, years of experience. And then, a number of others within our group have a similar amount. We've spent a lot of time really trying to understand life science business, what it means, how the life cycle works, and how we can really respond to those needs in a real estate fashion, and make sure that we are partnering with the occupiers and landlords alike to make sure that the buildings that are constructed, as well as the deals that go with those buildings, are applicable to the product type, understanding that it's very specific and very different from the other types of product that you typically see in a real estate world. I've spent the majority of my career focused on nothing but life science, so it's hard. I'm almost the opposite of the majority of the people in the UK, where they're trying to translate office needs onto a life science product. I kind of go the other direction, where it's really the only thing that I understand. So I'm always trying to translate it the other direction. I don't know, Bridget, do you want to talk about more of the leasing piece of it?
Yeah, so as I said, I work in the Southeast Agency team, but we have teams globally where we negotiate on life sciences leases every day, up to 100 leases per annum. Therefore, we're fully up to date with all the transaction needs and the kind of the finer details which, say, a life science lease might require above and beyond a standard office lease.
We do spend a lot of our time with our global network of professionals. Obviously the life science industry from a commercial standpoint is way more advanced in America. So we spend a lot of time. I mean, I was there last week looking at different product types and trends and understanding from a technical standpoint, what the future looks like, and really listening and learning and taking notes. And then we also spend time with our EMEA colleagues, almost in the other direction, where we are sort of that middleman between the more advanced group in America and the less advanced groups in EMEA, and really trying to translate and be that link, that critical link between all the various groups, and understanding how we can learn from one another and really support our various clients.
So we have quite a data-driven approach. We have teams of researchers that sit with us, where we look at what's going on in not only the UK, but as Jenny said, globally as well. And then we can use this information to understand better off what's happening today, but also what we think is going to be happening in the years to come. This information is really useful for not only kind of landlords who we help advise for what type of buildings that they should be potentially delivering and to what standard, but also so occupiers can understand what's happening in their kind of micro location. We advise anything from startups, so potentially one person and a bench, through to scale ups and the larger corporates, again across the UK and globally. We understand kind of the different needs that those individuals might have, and how we can best help support them and understand what it is that their business is going to need today, but also in the coming years, and how that then affects what type of facility they might be looking to take. So this is just a quick diagram of the UK market. So the red is the advanced markets. So as you may guess, Oxford, Cambridge and London, the Golden Triangle, but also the established markets, so places like Stevenage, Manchester, Edinburgh, Glasgow and Nottingham. One I must admit that's I think missed off there is Bristol, which you're definitely seeing coming through more recently. As you know, there's a lot of demand in these areas. The demand for space is definitely growing. For instance, Cambridge at the moment, we're seeing demand around the 1 million square foot mark, which unfortunately isn't met by the current availability, which is causing obviously quite a few issues for those companies who are needing to grow and find new facilities. Found that the key reasons for these clusters in these areas is down to things like VC funding, the talent pool, being close to those academia, such as the universities, and the maturing real estate sector as well.
So tagging on to what Bridget was saying, there is a lot of demand in the pipeline, and obviously I think that it's no secret that there's not a lot of supply in the pipeline today. Because of those two things combined, you are getting a lot of tenants that are scrambling to find space with not a lot of time on their hands. So I guess the point that we wanted to get across, and where we want to make sure that we're being heard, is timing is important. Getting ahead of it and starting to really understand your real estate needs as early as possible is of critical importance if you actually want to land in a quality space that you might be able to learn and grow and thrive in. Also, the quality piece of the equation, because of the shortage of supply, there are a number of I guess occupiers and real estate developer type folks alike that don't have a lot of experience with this type of kit, that are trying to enter the market and bringing some product to the market that is, in our collective view, subpar and not really fit for purpose for our clients today, nor will it be ready for them to thrive and grow in the next 5 to 10 years, depending on the length of their lease. So our role essentially is trying to help tenants, occupiers really understand what the different options are out there, and also dilute, or I guess filter through, to make sure that we're only providing the most quality spaces. And if we can't get the most quality spaces, actually helping them, learn how to fit it out themselves, or, come up with a real estate solution that's actually fit for purpose for whatever your specific industry is. Is there anything else we wanted to cover on this slide? Yeah, just a point that, the landlords in a lot of these retrofit type buildings, the code in the UK essentially allows for office product to be converted to life science product without having to go through a change of use process. So I think that there's a lot of these spaces that are being essentially flipped over and converted. And there's a question out there, from those of us that have some experience in the world of life science about the integrity of those buildings and their ability to sustain life science, and the more health and safety concerns that I know a lot of the occupiers actually have. So
I think we're definitely seeing that kind of being on the ground, that because the life science market is so strong at the moment, and as you're aware, it's often in the news, and it's something that a lot of people are wanting to be involved in, that a lot of landlords who don't necessarily have that experience are keen to be involved. And this is where we're then seeing this potentially subpar space where they don't have the knowledge or the years of experience to deliver that product, but wish to try and market it as a life science building, which, when you actually kind of dig into the specification of the building, just isn't quite there. So the UK trends at the moment, as a lot of you are probably very well aware, there's no purpose-built lab space being delivered in Golden Triangle this year. There's very kind of small piecemeal bits, again, that might be potentially a retrofitted option, but definitely nothing of any quantum. In Cambridge, there's a few schemes now coming through that are looking to be delivered in 2023. I think we'll see a reasonable amount of quantum coming through in, say, 2026. There's a few schemes at the moment going through planning. Likely build times on these products is circa 2 years. So obviously that leaves a huge gap in the market. As I said earlier, we're seeing named demand, so that's companies who we're actually physically speaking to, whether that's directly or who are represented or that we're represented, who are looking for space. Many of these companies are looking for something that they can actually be up and running in, within the next 6 or so months. And for instance, depending on the specification of the building that you take, this could be, say, a shell and core building, which is, layman's terms, pretty much empty. You could be looking at a 6-month plus amount of time for you to actually be fitted and then in occupation and up and running. And obviously that's going to have a big effect on your operations, your R&D, and that could potentially mean you being downing tools for a month or so if you haven't understood when it is that you need to find a new building. Unfortunately, at the moment, there just isn't that availability, and it's taken a lot of developers until now to realise actually there is this amount of pent-up demand, and they are slowly becoming to realise this and then react. Obviously, that has quite a time lag for the actual space to go through planning, which in areas like Cambridge it is quite tricky and definitely time consuming, and then for the space to actually come on. Definitely see a correlation between funding. So we, as a company, we track VC funding, so we can understand who's gaining the funding and the kind of the market intel with who's receiving and how long it takes for those companies to then understand and be looking for potential expansion and therefore the building that they might need to take. It tends to be around that kind of 6 or 9 months. We completely understand it. It's a difficult scenario where the funding comes in and you need to make quite a quick decision, and you're also potentially gaining funding rounds, say, every 2 years, and then need to find a real estate option in those cycles. And it's very difficult, we appreciate, of how you can then plan that, and that you're not necessarily quite sure in that 2 or 5 years what exactly your need is going to be. which then becomes increasingly important when you're potentially taking a lease where a landlord might be requesting that you take a 5-year straight, or even say a 10-year. And how does that look for your business? Are you potentially needing to expand? And where will you be in those times? So covering off that in a bit more detail, when we represent occupiers, it's increasingly important to be there almost kind of on day one when you're looking to understand what is it that you're actually needing. You know, how is the business made up? What size are you looking to be in? Have you considered how people are now looking to work? Is that, you know, a flexi model where you're going to be working from home? Are those people also working longer hours? So if they're, for instance, 24 hours or working not a standard 9 to 5, have you considered what that actually means in your location? Are your staff going to be happy, for instance, walking from that facility to their car later evening? Where is it that they're going to be getting their evening meals? So it's really important to have open discussions at a very early stage to see how those decisions may impact what type of facility you're going to be looking at. Access to finance, having the ability to engage with your local VC funding entities. Are they nearby? Does the facility you're looking at have things like meeting rooms or areas where actually you can then engage with those VC fundings? Along with ability to attract and retain talent, obviously the main part or importance is attracting your employees. It's critical to make sure that you are retaining the best in class and not losing them, for instance, to your competitors, or not being able to employ someone because they physically can't get to your building. Is there good transport links? Do you need to be more central? Or as a business, actually, is it best for you to be, for instance, on the science park where you can collaborate and you can benefit from those ecosystems? And is it important for you as a business to be around, as say, those ecosystems and clusters and benefit from smaller SMEs and potentially have those collaborations? Are you bioscience, but actually you want to start looking at potential with AI companies? How do you sit within those clusters? Do you want to be part of that? Or, for instance, is more of a central location of more benefit? And all of these decisions will then allow you to build on what your requirement is and make sure that the building you choose is then going to be fit for purpose for you today, but also in 5 years' time, and allow you to grow and give you that flexibility as the business changes and potentially you gain another round of VC funding in a year's time, or potential projects come on board.
So Bridget touched on this a bit when she was discussing about, where your company sits in terms of the current workplace environment and future workplace environment. And I think not unlike other industries, there's a big, pretty large scale from clients that actually want their occupiers in the office every day, and then some that I think that want their people in the office much less, and are much less rigid in terms of that coming back to the office world. I think the one biggest differentiator is because of the way life science works is the 100% working from home model doesn't work in life science. You need the physical space. You need those more technical specifications to be able to do science, to have the health and safety requirements in place. And they, the rest of it trending. It's sort of is company to company. And I guess the point that we want to make is just making sure that you understand who you are as a company and where you think that you're going to be going in the future, and understanding that early in your process, and making sure that you're speaking to your real estate partners about that, just so that you are able to go out and source the right space for yourself, and to make sure that you've got that lab to office ratio accurately defined, and making sure that the provider for that sort of space can support it from a technical standpoint. A lot of these buildings are built on some baseline design elements, i.e. 50-50 lab to office requirement, right? So they put in the mechanical systems to support that sort of ratio. And if you as a company are a much more working remote type environment, so then you need an 80-20 type environment where you're really just going to use your facility for science. That's the sort of stuff that you need to think of in advance of actually starting to look for your space, so that to make sure that whenever you go and compare different options, you've got apples to apples, and that the various options actually support who you are as a company. And sustainability. So I guess, there's no secret that real estate is a vast contributor to the growing problem of global warming. We as a company spend a lot of our time thinking about sustainability and trying to be on the front end of improvements. It's difficult when it comes to life science, because obviously, as everyone on this call knows, I'm sure, we are very energy hungry, not very environmentally friendly type occupiers. Obviously, the stats here say that we on average use about 10 times the amount of power, 4 times the amount of water, and we obviously have an enormous amount of waste that comes out of facilities. I think it's really interesting speaking to an occupier audience, because I spend a lot of my time speaking with the developer side of the equation, but really I think that the future and the ability to actually enact change comes from the occupier side. Really understanding where your health and safety procedures stand, and how you can look at those smartly, and obviously protect the health and safety of employees, but also start to be forward thinking, and how you can make some changes and still be able to do your business in a way that works. And from a health and safety standpoint, like, could you identify specific rooms in a building that are higher containment and higher air changes, et cetera, and then maybe reduce them in the bigger labs? Can you get creative with what type of fume hoods you're using, where they've got the automatic closers on the hoods to prevent waste of air? So I really think that the future and the ability to actually enact change lies in the hands of the occupiers in so many different ways. The future is coming, and the life science group, I don't think will be able to be excluded from that in any real way. So I guess that our point is like really just talking to us, and like, let's have a conversation about what those requirements are, and where they might land in the future, and how that might work within the different buildings that are available for lease. Different developers and landlords alike, building owners, are going to have their own requirements and their own sustainability measures, and making sure that your requirements and needs are also in line with the provider's wants and needs, I think will be of critical importance.
I think that's something that definitely, from the tenant representation side of things, we've seen the last year or so, how we've had to work with a lot of occupiers to understand what their ESG or kind of CSR credentials are, and what goals that they potentially want to meet, but also making sure that very early on, when we're considering shortlisting of potentially, say, 5 buildings, is making sure that we're aware of what their ESG credentials are, and future proofing. There's going to be a lot of, obviously, government implication of rules and legislation that means that buildings have to meet a certain criteria. At the moment, this is all based on EPCs, which I must admit we don't see being the best guidance, because that looks at kind of the building and not really how it's actually run, which has a far higher impact. But there'll be a lot of buildings that are being marketed at the moment which actually will fall short of those EPC rules for, say, 2027, and then another change up to EPC B in 2030. And it's what's the implication of that to you as an occupier. And if you're, for instance, taking a 10-year lease, what happens if your building doesn't meet that criteria and you're still in occupation? Is the landlord going to have to come in and do works? How is that going to affect how you're running your business in your day-to-day R&D? And just making sure that you are fully covered prior to potentially occupying that space, or making sure that actually that isn't a building that you look at. And this is the issue again with potentially retrofitting life science into a secondary type of building, compared to, say, one of the kind of the new developments that aren't available today. I think in the future we'll see potentially a change with the legislation. So, for instance, there's another criteria called neighbours, which looks at the occupational side. So as an occupier, you have to make sure that you are within certain criteria of, energy used, waste, for example, and you have to stipulate that within that part of your lease that you have to comply with that. But at the moment, that doesn't include life sciences. But I think probably the future, I imagine that's what we'll start seeing, is that actually not only will it be on the office users, it will also be on life science. And I think it's just really critical to make sure that it's something that you're potentially considering now, so that if you have got a lease of, say, 10 years, you know that you are covered for those 10 years and you're not going to be having to make drastic changes, which are likely to be quite costly within that lease term. So a bit about how JLL can help. Obviously, we covered a lot of this throughout the rest of the presentation. This is just a quick slide on a number of the occupiers, those that you'll be well acquainted with globally. So this might be on a tenant representation side, or, for instance, Jenny as well. So as I alluded to a bit earlier, from a tenant rep point of view, we represent a number of occupiers, and sometimes we're brought in quite late when businesses have already found a potential facility, and this does tend to lead to a number of issues just due to losing the ability to negotiate, and often finding that this isn't necessarily the best facility that they could find that suits the business. And again, it's understanding exactly what does your business need today, what does that look like, and making sure you're covered for the next 5-10 years. And we fully appreciate that it's difficult to know, where are we going to be in 5 years? What level of funding? Have we grown by 50%? But then that might mean that we then consider more flexible options. Are there parks or buildings that will allow you to upsize? Are there places where, for instance, we might be aware of what we class as grey space, which is an occupier subleasing their space? And these might be opportunities that actually aren't on the market. So things that we're aware of through our contacts, whether that be occupier or landlord. And then this might be an opportunity that then allows you to grow in this 2 years. Is it understanding opportunities such as taking a larger lease, but actually we can then negotiate and allow you to then sublet in part. And at which stage, in say 2 years' time, when you need that additional space, you can serve notice on your subtenant. And so that allows you to then naturally grow into that space, protecting your operations. And it's making sure that we together understand what it is that your company need now and in future time. Is it CL2 moving into CL3 potentially when you're working on a project in the future? Making sure that you do have enough power and that you're not the last occupier going into a building and realizing that actually there isn't enough room within the risers because the landlord hasn't allowed or specified who can have space. Is there enough plant? And it is fundamental points like this that myself and working very closely with Jenny and the other life science team will make sure that your business can run to its full capacity. And it's working together from the beginning to understand those implications of your timing, size. We understand what's going on in the market. We work on this every day, and then allowing you to focus on the important parts of working on the science. And whilst doing this, we can then make sure that we secure the best deal for you, potentially gaining you additional rent-free, potentially looking into options such as having a fitted product and actually negotiating that, yes, you might pay a slightly higher rent, but actually you don't have that huge capex right at the beginning. So you can actually use the funding that you've worked hard to raise on the science. And so it's those conversations that where we're having every day, we can make sure that we can pass the benefit on to you. And what say we'll often work with Jenny and Rupert on making sure that the design and project management all run smoothly and you then have a building that's capable of everything you need.
Yeah, so with that, so this is just a capability statement for what I described earlier as our P&DS group. So between the various members in our group, we've got over 2 million square feet of total delivery experience. 1+ million square feet of that is on the developer landlord side. So that's largely based on my background delivering product in America and now in the UK for the last couple of years. That's commercially oriented space. A lot of times those are multi-tenant spaces. So, you know, a lot of my understanding of the world is how you can create a building with shared functions so that multiple tenants can thrive within one outer box, whether that be understanding the different mechanical systems, what's dedicated, what's not dedicated, what the risk profiles of those different types of systems are. You know, how can you share some things like an emergency generator, but then where do you as an occupier need to have control, i.e. do you have a specific science that you need to be 100% in control over the maintenance and operating profile of your mechanical unit. So therefore you need to bifurcate those functions and hold them in-house. I spend a lot of times on looking at, you know, shipping and receiving areas and how those types of functions, as well as a bigger sort of, I guess, the bigger conversation around placemaking, choice interactions, amenities, and all the sort of stuff that supports life science users within a larger campus and or a larger building where you're sharing space. Rupert, who unfortunately wasn't able to join today, his background is predominantly in the occupier side of the business. So he and his team have collectively delivered over 1 million square feet of space on the other side of the equation. A lot of that has been focused on the public sector work. So he's done a lot of work with the larger R&Ds, pharma, medtech, manufacturing type users that you're all familiar with. He's also done a lot of work for the NHS and recently came across from guys in St. Thomas. So a lot of work on that public sector side of the equation. We're currently delivering a space out of the Bristol area that's a complicated manufacturing CMDO building, and you know, working with various occupiers coming across from America to help them translate what they have in America to what they need here in the UK to be able to function in a GMP type environment and regulatory system. So I guess in summary, we've done it all between the two of us. And then we also have a team within the JLL portfolio. So the P&DS group for the UK is made up of about 200 professionals that you know, cover all sorts of different areas, from technical to hotels to et cetera, to all different types of fit outs. So we have a level of comfort and risk protection in that we've got a lot of people, professionals that have a lot of experience doing building within the United Kingdom and really understanding how to get things complete from their infancy to completion. With that, I guess that, you know, one of the things that I've learned here in the UK is that a lot of clients will go direct to various developers, et cetera, when they're looking for space. And in my mind, they sort of skip a step. And you know, Bridget's touched on this a little bit, but really trying to understand, you know, your real estate needs before you go out and start looking for space. So starting to compile teams of lab planners, architects, engineers, depending on your specific requirements, and really getting the lay of the land in advance of which will then translate into your real estate need. So our team can certainly help facilitate that in connecting occupiers with the best in class engineers, lab planners, architects, et cetera, throughout the United Kingdom and in EMEA and further beyond, if and when needed. We are pretty well connected with the best of the best here in the UK. And you know, to the point earlier that we mentioned about some of the product that's coming online, and the various different players that are trying to insert themselves into the life science industry, we are pretty well equipped to weed out the right people from the wrong people, and make sure that we're helping our clients appoint the appropriate engineering staff and the appropriate specialty type staff and makeup of groups to produce the right product.
So that's quite I guess a short overall highlights of how not only can we help, but the market as a whole. If anyone's got any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them. Whereas myself and Rupert will actually be with you on Thursday. We'll have a stand there, so please feel free to come and have a chat, say hello, and if you've got any questions, we'd be more than happy to speak to you then as well.
Thank you, Bridget and Jenny. Sorry, I'm just trying to work my way back on. I need to work on my transitions of coming on and off camera. There we go. Thank you so much for sharing such interesting insights into the current trends at the moment, and for some great advice for people who are looking for space. We do obviously have some time now if anyone has got any questions or comments that you'd like to pop in the chat box. Otherwise, as Bridget said, her and Rupert will be there on Thursday on Helix, so make the most of that. We do just have one question actually in the chat box from, not question, sorry, just a comment from Stephen about just putting a shout out in for Norwich Research Park, where they have 3 BBSRC funded institutes, Quadrum, John Innes and the Earlham Institute. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so Yeah, thank you again, Bridget, and thank you, and Jenny, of course, and for everybody that dialed in today. I hope you enjoyed the session. Our next innovation workshop starts at 1:30, and that is with BioWin. And we hope to see you there too.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.